So, what actually happened back there? As soon as I asked that question, my old classmate's face changed completely. We were sitting in my little kitchen. It's definitely seen better days and has been begging for some repairs for a few years now, but it was just us. My old friend and me, sitting at the table, having a bite to eat and a few drinks. We hadn't seen each other in years and finally, as they say, our paths crossed. He recently moved out of that hole in the ground to get closer to civilization. And it turns out he settled down right near me. We actually bumped into each other by total accident at the store. We didn't overthink it. We just grabbed a bottle of good cognac and a couple of chocolate bars, then headed back to my place. It was such a warm conversation. I learned a ton about my school friend, and I shared a lot about my life too. We laughed, reminisced about our school years, and gossiped about who is where now and what everyone is up to. You know, the usual stuff. A lot of people, of course, stayed back in the village where we grew up. Listen, how is Theodore doing over there? I asked with a smile. You mean Johnson? Yeah, that's him. He passed away, he sighed. It's been a couple of months now. No way, seriously? How? Well, something happened there that turned the whole village upside down. Suddenly, Mateo's face just changed. That cheerful guy sitting across from me vanished without a trace. It seemed like he remembered something he really didn't want to think about. He pulled a cigarette from the pack and lit it with a shaking hand. That's actually why I moved here, he told me. To get away from that hole where I wasted half my life. Things happen there that, God forbid you ever have to see or hear them. He blew out a cloud of bitter smoke and started his story. I have to say, I couldn't help but believe him. Even though at first I wondered if Mateo had maybe had a little too much to drink and was talking nonsense. Anyway, the rest of the story is exactly how he told it. Back then, I was still working in law enforcement, so to speak. As soon as I finished the academy, they sent me right back to the village. They made me the local officer, gave me a station, an office, the whole works. To be honest, I never really understood why they needed me there. Even after 10 years on the job. But I wasn't complaining. My seniority was building up, the pay was actually pretty decent, and I mostly just sat in the office playing video games. Every now and then, sure, there were incidents, drunken fights, or maybe someone stealing livestock. But tell me, what can really happen in a dump like that? When they put up a cell tower, it was the event of the century. People talked about it for a month, I swear. So, I sat in that office for nearly 10 years. My anniversary was coming up in a couple of months. Damn it. The village was slowly dying out, leaving more and more empty houses. The young folks were rushing to get out of that cesspool to find a better life somewhere else. And eventually, I had to leave too, after what those of us left behind had to face. Why did you stay there so long? I couldn't help asking. I stayed because of the job. I begged my bosses to transfer me somewhere else. But sadly, I never had any luck. Anyway, listen, Mateo said, putting out his cigarette. One night, I stayed really late at the station. I was watching a movie and I actually fell asleep. Can you believe it? I opened my eyes and it was pitch black outside. So I gathered my things, changed my clothes, and started the walk home. It was so cold that night. I was walking down the street, shivering like a dog, still half asleep. Then I noticed Grandma Ava's gate was open. You probably don't even remember her. At first, I thought about just walking past. But when I got even with her fence, I decided to go in and check if the old lady was okay. The first thing that hit me was the front door. It was wide open, and her dog was cowering in its doghouse, whining. I rushed toward the house. Ava Smith, are you here? Is everything okay? But there was only silence. I yelled again, but there was still no answer. In the end, I decided to go inside. I checked the kitchen, the first room, the second, nobody. I thought that was strange. I went down to the garden, thinking maybe she went to the outhouse since it's outside. Not there. I even looked in the chicken coop. It was like she fell off the face of the earth. But the weirdest part was that the lights were on, and her bed was still warm. It looked pretty odd, but even then, I decided not to sound the alarm. I figured, she's an old lady, maybe she just popped out to see someone, maybe to get a pill or something, and forgot to close the door. Things happen. So, I just went home. But the next morning, nothing had changed. On my way to work, I saw the gate was still wide open, and the house door too. Basically, the old lady was gone. I spent half the day asking the villagers, but no one had seen or heard a thing. It was like they all vanished into thin air. The search began. We found a few volunteers among the locals, and I was one of them. We combed the whole village and the forest surrounding it until late at night. There weren't many people. I mean, who wants to drive out to the middle of nowhere to look for a missing old lady? Thank God they sent someone to help. We only found her around 2 in the morning, thanks to the dogs catching the scent. Mateo leaned in closer to me and spoke quietly. The old woman was torn apart brutally and stuck on a branch in the middle of a field near the treeline. Cross my heart. I even have photos, I'll show you later. There were dark stains all over the ground under the tree. I almost felt sick when I saw it. But the craziest thing was that she was way up near the very top of the tree. We stood under that tree for probably 20 minutes in silence. Everyone just looked up, completely freaked out by what was happening. The dogs ran around a bit, then just lay down nearby and whined quietly. By the way, the devils carried her far, probably 5 kilometers from the village, maybe more. We thought about it and decided to cut down the tree. There was no other way to get the body down. We had to bury her, after all. The body was damaged beyond recognition. Her injuries were unnatural, and her head looked barely attached. I had never seen anything like it in all my time on the force. Back then, only one question bothered me. Who could have done this? You'd need superhuman strength to take a not-so-skinny old lady and stick her on the top of a tree. It was like 35 meters high. We got Grandma Ava down with some difficulty and buried her the next day in a closed casket. My workload increased. For the first time in my service, I faced something like this, and honestly, I didn't know what to do. There wasn't a single clue. More than that, I couldn't understand who on earth had the strength to drag a 90-kilogram body to the very top of a tree. But then it got worse. Literally a couple of days later, the same story repeated itself. A guy disappeared, let's call him Victor. He lived at the end of the street. Absolutely the same scenario. Door wide open, gate open. Absolutely no traces. Search again, woods again. But this time we couldn't find the body that day. The guy just vanished, and that was it. Mateo leaned in again and hissed. Believe it or not, but I was already starting to think something unnatural was happening. I mean, how did the old lady end up in the tree? It's impossible. You should have seen how high it was. 3 days later, in the evening, we finally found that guy. His frozen body was lying in a field near the forest strip. Same terrible injuries. What was interesting is that he was standing on all fours in the middle of the wheat. After the second incident, I got genuinely scared. People vanish without a trace, and then they're found gone. And not just gone, but like that. My first thoughts were that we had a maniac or a dangerous criminal in our area. But as soon as I remembered the old woman in the tree, that theory automatically fell apart. That same evening, the local men armed themselves with whatever they could find and went out to hunt the supposed killer. It looked funny and terrifying at the same time. A bunch of guys with pitchforks, walking around with axes and flashlights, looking for who knows what. And I was right there with them. I mean, where else would I be? I'm the police officer, for crying out loud. First, we checked the whole village, but finding no one, we turned toward the fields. Eventually, we made it to the tree line and combed through that, too. We were actually just thinking about splitting up and going home when one of the guys accidentally swung his flashlight beam toward the field. I swear to God, something was there. Guys, look, he yelled. I turned my head immediately. Maybe 5 meters away from us, so close, something started moving. In the dead silence of the night, you could hear it perfectly. We all froze and stared at the spot. Suddenly, a bald head shot up out of the wheat. A few seconds later, right in the beam of the flashlight, something that looked like a person slowly stood up. Mateo got visibly nervous and pulled another cigarette from the pack. What do you mean? Looked like? I asked. I mean literally, he whispered, like he was afraid someone might hear him. It wasn't human. The thing stood on 2 legs, but it was hunched over really bad. It had sharp cheekbones and a round mouth with 6 sharp fangs sticking out. Its nose looked like a corpse that had been rotting underground for years. And 2 yellow eyes that glowed in the dark, with no pupils. But the body looked exactly like a human's. I have no idea how we didn't spot it earlier while we were walking around out there. Then, things just went completely insane. We didn't stare at each other for long. The creature let out this ear-piercing scream. It was loud and made my blood run cold. It felt like the sound traveled for kilometers. And then it snapped. It rushed at us so fast. The thing pounced on Williams. His flashlight went out, and he hit the ground, gasping for air. I still remember that sound to this day. After seeing and hearing that, our brave little team scattered in every direction like rats. I took off running too, wherever my eyes led me. But I didn't get far. It was pitch black, remember? The guys with the flashlights had run off, so I turned and sprinted blindly into the woods. I looked back for a second, didn't see the tree in front of me, and bam! I ran full speed right into it. I fell hard right there under the tree. My vision was double, and my head was pounding. But even dazed, I saw the creature. I saw it chasing me. It was running on all fours, easily jumping over ravines and fallen logs. Sitting under that tree, I said goodbye to my life. I'm telling you honestly. I sat there thinking, this is it. It's going to get me. No more Officer Mateo. The thing jumped on me maybe 20 seconds after I fell. It grabbed me with its hands and tried to bite my neck. I fought back with everything I had left, trying to push it off with my hands, but it was incredibly strong. It growled, clearly annoyed, and finally sank its teeth in, but not in my neck, thank God. It bit me closer to the shoulder. The pain was insane. It shot through my whole body, and I couldn't stop myself from screaming. I don't know how it happened, maybe it was an adrenaline rush, but somehow I kicked it off me with my legs. I finally managed to pull my service weapon from the holster and pulled the trigger. Right after my scream, there was a bang so loud my ears popped. The creature shrieked and jumped back immediately. I fired again, but I missed that time. Before I could even blink, the smoke from the gunshot cleared, and it was gone. The last thing I saw was the nearby bushes moving. I lay under that tree for a while, still not believing what had just happened. My shoulder was throbbing and bleeding bad. I tore a piece off my shirt and tried to bandage it up. That helped a little. Finally, I gathered my thoughts, got to my feet, and walked home as fast as I could. I was terrified I'd run into that thing again. Even I got goosebumps just listening to his story. Finally lighting that cigarette, he continued. I got back to the village deep in the night. I barely made it out of those damn woods. It was pitch black, you couldn't see a thing. And you know, I really wanted to look into the eyes of everyone who was so eager to organize the search for that so-called maniac. Only to leave me there. Who scattered like rats, leaving me there all alone. But that's a different story. Listen to what happened next. I went back to the station, changed my clothes, and bandaged my shoulder properly this time. Then I headed home. Of course, there was no way I was going to sleep after what happened in that field. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, drinking coffee and trying to find any information about the creature I had met. My hands were shaking as I typed a description into Google. At first, I didn't find anything except made-up ghost stories. But then I found one Slavic legend that described something more or less similar. It talked about a creature called an urka. It was described as a vicious, skinny being from Slavic mythology. The legend said that ancient Slavs considered ending one's own life a terrible sin. A person who chose that dark path was doomed to wander the night as an urka, hunting people to try and replenish their own life force. Its eyes glow in the dark. It looks human, but the body is disfigured with sores and dark spots. This evil spirit hunts only at night. It moves very fast and completely silently, stalking its victim for a long time. That was exactly what I saw. But the most important part was the rule. Under no circumstances should you look at it, and you must never turn around. That is exactly what it waits for. If you do, you freeze in terror, and that's it. It does whatever it wants with you. It can even speak to confuse its victim. It mostly lives in fields, but in some cases, it can break into a human home. Reading that in the middle of the night almost made me lose my mind. People don't just invent things like that for no reason. Someone must have met it and seen it, just like I did. Anyway, I sat in the kitchen until morning, never closing my eyes. I only slept for a few hours at work the next day, and that was it. The following night was what finally forced me to pack my bags and get as far away from that place and that field as possible. What happened that night? I asked with interest. I was woken up in the middle of the night by a knock at the window. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, I realized I wasn't. The knock was so light. Then I heard fast footsteps outside, followed by another knock, but on a different window. Lying there with my eyes open, I already guessed who it was. But then the voice of Theodore Johnson drifted in, and it pushed the bad thoughts away. Sighing with relief, I went to the window and looked out into the yard. "Where are you? Open up," I heard from the street. "Yeah, I'm coming. Couldn't you just call me? You know everyone has a phone these days, right?" I couldn't see him through the window, and his voice sounded like it was coming from the porch. My brain was still foggy from sleep, so I just walked out to the hallway. I almost unlocked the door, but I stopped just in time. I saw a hand knocking on the glass, a hand I recognized all too well from that night in the field. My insides tightened instantly, like I was being crushed in a giant vice. From outside, Theodore's voice whined, "Are you gonna open this or not?" But standing right there on the other side of the door was that creature. "Wait, how is that even possible?" I asked, totally shocked. "I swear on my life. Let everyone spit in my face if I'm lying. That filth was standing there, speaking with Theodore's exact voice. You understand? It was definitely an Urka. Everything I read in that article was real. But the legend also said how to drive it away. It said what they're afraid of. Fire. They are terrified of fire more than anything else." I ran to the kitchen. All this time, it kept knocking on the window, trying to sweet-talk me into opening the door. But I didn't fall for its tricks. It must have sensed I wasn't buying it, because it started getting aggressive. It banged on the windows harder. It pounded on the door so hard the whole frame shook. And then it started growling at me with its real voice. My hands were shaking, but I managed to throw together a makeshift torch. I wrapped an old t-shirt around a mop, soaked it in solvent, and quickly struck a match. Outside, the thing was going crazy. It was throwing itself at the door, muttering something under its breath, and peeking into the windows. I kept telling myself, "Don't look at it. That's exactly what it wants." With that thought in my head, I ran to the window. I threw it open, tossed the burning mop right at the creature, and slammed it shut just as fast. I stumbled backward. As soon as the Urka saw the flames, it bolted. It scrambled over the garden fence and disappeared into the night. The very next day, I called my superiors. I told them straight. Either transfer me somewhere else, or I'm resigning effective immediately. I wasn't staying in that hellhole another minute. They denied the transfer, so I handed in my badge. Do I regret it? Honestly, not one bit. Thank God everything is peaceful here in the city. You know, I actually called my neighbor back in the village after I moved. He told me his dog goes crazy at night. And he said he saw someone walking around my old yard once, knocking on the windows. "That is terrifying," I whispered. "You have no idea. By the way, I sold the house. Got pennies for it, sure, but I sold it." And Theodore? It got him third. That night when we first ran into it in the field, that's what it was doing, preying on him. So, that's the story, my friend. Matteo sighed and looked at his glass. "All right, come on, let's have one more for the road, and then I should head out. It's getting late."